Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, we're going to be discussing whether you should or should not be doing warm-up, what the benefits and the cons are. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, warm-up is the process of taking your email accounts and putting them in a pool with other email accounts and making them artificially facilitate conversations. Okay. Now this is done automatically in tools like Smartly and Instantly with the goal of making these email accounts look legitimate in the eyes of Google and Outlook, right? You're basically making fake conversation as if they're talking to each other, as if they're actually at a real company. Okay. Now, for the longest time in code email, warm-up has been something that everyone has undisputedly done. No one's ever argued that code email or that warm-up in code email isn't something you should be doing, right? But recently, there's been a lot of conversation about whether warm-up is or is not actually good for deliverability. Okay, now 2 weeks of warm-up at the very least, under no circumstances, what everyone's done for the longest time. So you can imagine that people now saying that you don't need it at all is a pretty crazy statement, right? And you need to have evidence for that. But in this video, we're going to go over all of the evidence and all of the truth about whether warm-up is or is not good. I'm going to show you guys a real test that we ran internally in our company with over 500 email accounts. And then you can make a decision for yourself on whether you want to do warm-up or not. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, how can warm-up hurt you? Now, in order to understand why people claim that warm-up could potentially be hurting your deliverability, you need to understand how warm-up actually works behind the scenes. Okay, now I'm going to be using Smartly's warm-up pool as an example, but the same concepts apply to every other platform that actually offers warm-up. Okay, now when you enable warm-up in Smartly, you're prompted to enter a couple of key settings. That includes your max sending volume, that includes your sending ranges, that includes your reply rate, that includes your scale-up interval. And as you implement these settings, your goal is to attempt to mimic a real person's email behavior. Okay, so let's say that you implement 35 max emails per day with a 25 to 35 randomizer and a 35 reply rate and a 3 per day scale up interval. What you're basically telling Smartly to do is take your email account and send out 3 emails per day and keep increasing it by 3 emails until you hit that 25 to 35 number. And at that point, the interval will go up, but there will also be a randomizer applied on top of it. Okay. Now, the goal is that when you're doing this, you're making these email accounts look as if they're really at a real company communicating with each other, with customers, and with everyone else. You're trying to mimic what real email use looks like. Okay, so the idea is you have this warm-up pool, and that's who you're sending to. Hey guys, we're gonna get right back to the video in just a minute. But real quick, do you want a done-for-you cold email lead generation solution that is able to consistently book you meetings with your ideal buyers? We just helped Morty from Your Business Now book over 30 clients in just 2 months of working together, and Avi from Daily Dose of Data Science get over 40 calls in our first 10 days of sending cold email. Now, if you guys want a consistent flow of buyers on your calendar, you can book a meeting with me and my team in the description below. Okay, talk soon. So here's where the potential problem arises. Now, these warm-up pools, which have email accounts, including yours and including everybody else's who are doing warm-up, are completely unregulated, meaning you can connect really anything you want as long as it's supported by your sending tool. And these sending tools pretty much support anything. They have public infrastructure, private infrastructure, and anything in between. Okay, now that includes, of course, being able to connect all sorts of private infrastructure and also personal Gmail and Outlook accounts. And additionally, this opens up space for having non-active email accounts in the warm-up pool. Like, for example, let's say that you buy 100 email accounts and then all of a sudden you just cancel those email accounts. They're still in the warm-up pool. And now, whenever people email those addresses, they're gonna have a hard bounce, which significantly increases your odds of going to spam. Now, of course, Smartly and Instantly and all of the major tools, they're not strangers to that fact. They know that this is happening, and they will remove your accounts from the warm-up pool if you're having bounces register, right? But nevertheless, you're gonna do damage to other people's email accounts if you do that, and that's one of the big problems with the cold email warm-up pools. Okay, now it's a known fact that also sending to personal email accounts is often a pretty risky task, right? Meaning, what do I mean by personal email accounts? If you have an email address like george@borks.io, that is an enterprise email account, right? It's on a domain. If you have an email address like george@gmail.com, more accurately, that is a public email account. That's a Gmail account, personal, right? You don't want to be sending to those. Again, you can physically do it. It's not like if you do it, like you're going to get like sued or something. It's just that it gets a lot more harder because those accounts have a higher spam policy because those are individuals. They're not companies, right? So of course, when those accounts are allowed to be into the warm-up pool, that ends up hurting everybody else because inevitably emails from your accounts, from the enterprise accounts, will go to those public accounts, and that could potentially hurt your inboxes. Now, I know what I said is pretty much a mouthful just now, but my point is anyone can add anything, and sometimes what they add isn't the highest quality email account. Okay. Now, what are we going to do about it? Now, I heard about this for the first time about 4 to 5 months ago, and at that point, I completely brushed it off. At the time of recording this video, we have 6,000 email accounts sending about 1.5 million emails per month, and every single account that we've ever had and ever will have has gone to the through the 2-week warm-up process. So naturally, I found it pretty hard to believe that I can just not do warm-up and just get away with it. Like, I found that pretty hard to believe. Right? But as time went on, this subject became more and more relevant. And at one point, I just decided, whatever, I'll do the test. I'll spend the money, and I'll know for a fact whether this is just a hoax or whether this is really the case. Okay. So we spun up 500 US-based enterprise Google accounts and decided to start sending from day one. These were not private infrastructure. These were not anything like that. These are just real Google accounts that actually, are full price. So it is what it is. Right. And what we decided to do is we started sending 5 emails per day on each account for the first 2 weeks, meaning it's very low volume, but of course, no warm up whatsoever. So you're sending from day one. Okay. And every couple of days, we would run an inbox placement test across all of our accounts and see how they were performing. Okay. Now, one thing I want to say, I'm just going to butt in real quick. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what inbox placement tests are, inbox placement tests are probably the only way in cold email to know how your deliverability is actually doing. Anything else like domain reputation score, the amount of blacklists you're on, your reply rate, your open rate, your OOO rate, they're all just vanity metrics. This is the only way to actually track whether your deliverability is good. Okay. We weren't going to make any irrational decisions off the bat, so we just did the testing. Okay. And on the first week, we were shocked. Right? We were straight up shocked because these accounts on the first week were performing just as well as the accounts with warm-up. Meaning, we bought these accounts, did no warm-up, launched them, and they were doing just as good as the ones with warm-up. Okay. But of course, it's only been a couple days of sending, so we didn't want to make any irrational decisions. Okay. Now, for that first week, no difference. This is how the inbox placement test looked back then. You can see 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. This one had 87.5, 100, 100, 100, whatever, right? And what this means is 100% of the inboxes that we were sending to were completely going to the inbox folder. Nothing was going to spam across Google or Outlook or private SMTPs, okay? So that was good. But after that first week of sending, things started to go very downhill. Right? Most of our email accounts were anywhere from 75 to 100% inbox placement rates. But after that, they started dropping significantly down to 25 to 50%, which you can see based on these reports of the accounts. Right here, you can see 1 month ago, this email account had a score of 87.5, meaning 100% of the time it was inboxing on Microsoft, but only 75% of the time it was inboxing on Google, which means that the overall score, the average of those two numbers was 87.5. And you can see 1 month ago, that was the oldest test that was in this sequence, I guess, right? Then you can see that next time I also tested it, right? It keeps saying 1 month ago, but there was obviously days in between these tests. Not like I was just testing them back and forth, but this tool only shows you in months and weeks. So that's why it says that. And for those of you familiar or those of you curious, this is Email Guard. This is probably the best and cheapest inbox placement tool on the market. We are actually partnered with them, so I do want to mention that, but they didn't pay me to say this. They didn't pay me to use them, nothing like that. This is just a tool that I really like and I use. So if you guys are interested, then you guys can check them out. But anyways, you can see that a month ago we had 87.5. Then I did another test. This was several days after, and all of a sudden we had 50%, and then we had 50% and 50% and 50%. And even further, this test started plateauing more and more and more, and we started having worse deliverability. Okay. Now, for example, right, here's another email account, which you can see the same thing. This one started off a little bit better, right? We had 75%, 70%, but then immediately 0, 0, 0, right? It was really, really starting to get hurt, these email accounts, over time. And keep in mind, this was 1 month ago and 4 weeks ago. So really the difference between these tests was only a week, right? In the matter of a week, we went from perfect deliverability to pretty much no deliverability, right? Which obviously isn't very ideal, especially considering how expensive infrastructure is. You don't want to just burn email accounts after a week. That's not very sustainable. Okay. And you can see that although this isn't the best way of showing it, this is one of the campaigns that we ran. Keep in mind, one of the campaigns. This is not the only campaign, right? things started dropping off pretty significantly. You guys can see the lines are up here, they're up here, they're up here, and then towards the end, they were down here, right? They were only getting about 1 reply a day, where before they were getting 6, 3, 2, right? They dropped off pretty significantly, okay? But you can see, on the other hand, the email accounts that did have warm up actually had the complete opposite change. So I'm gonna add a little bit of context because I got a little bit off track here. So although we were running this test to see how no warm-up accounts did, we also had email accounts which did have warm-up. So we did a side-by-side test. And what was really interesting is the accounts that did have warm-up experienced the complete opposite effect when we were doing this test, right? So you can see right here, this email account did go through warm-up. And when we just started with our outreach, we had a 50% overall score with 0% on Google and 100% on Microsoft. But then after a couple days, we ended up going back to 100, back to 100, and back to 100, and maintained that for the duration of the test, right? Now notice how the oldest test showed a 50% overall score, but it went quickly up to 100% after we went in the warm-up pool for a little bit longer. Now, I'm going to explain to you guys why I think this is happening in a later slide, but just keep that in mind. We started off with worse deliverability at the beginning, but ended up having better deliverability in the long term, but that was the complete opposite with the accounts that didn't have warm-up. So it kind of works like an inverse manner. Okay. Now this happened to a lot of email accounts. I'm not just cherry picking, showing you guys one account where this happened to. This was the majority of accounts. So of course, it was really interesting how it acted in a complete opposite manner. Okay. Now, here is my thesis. Now, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking to yourself, how can this be possible? How does this make any sense? Well, my personal thesis on this subject is that people are correct about warm-up to a degree. Okay. Yes, there is a potential that warm-up is actually harmful to your email accounts. You can probably, and not even probably, you definitely will receive hard bounces while you are in the warm-up pool, right? But here's the contingency. I think that the pros of warm-up significantly outweigh the cons of warm-up. Okay. Now, in our test, we saw that accounts that started off with worse deliverability that had warm-up, that was kind of like the main thing that was going on. The ones that did have warm-up started off with worse deliverability. The ones that didn't have warm-up started off with better deliverability. But that better deliverability very, very quickly went down, and on the other side, the deliverability on the warm-up accounts stayed and didn't go down, okay? Now, the reason why I think this is happening is because in the warm-up account test, those accounts received bounces while they were in the warm-up pool. I know for a fact, while they were warming up, each of those accounts had at least one bounce on them, okay? But they also received a bunch of replies. They were marked as important a bunch of times, and they managed to build a reputation with Google and Outlook. Where, on the other hand, the accounts without the warm-up, they didn't have the bounces, which resulted in, of course, perfect deliverability. But that was only at the start, and as they were sending, they ended up receiving bounces, but they weren't ready for them, right? Meaning, while on the other hand, of course, the accounts that did have warm-up had worse deliverability in the start, they also built up reputation. So even though, yes, they were harmed a little bit, they had a bunch of reputation, which helped get them back up there. The accounts that didn't have the bounces also didn't have all the benefits and ended up having a little bit of good deliverability in the start, but as soon as they started getting the bounces, they didn't have that good reputation with Google and Outlook to back them up, and they started going downhill. Okay, now, fact of the matter is there's no way to 100% avoid bounces. You're always gonna have them, right? Your goal should just be keeping your bounce rate under 2. And if you can do that, then you'll be good. But you'll never have a 0% bounce rate. That's simply not possible. It doesn't matter how many times you verify your emails or what you do, you'll never have a 0% bounce rate. Okay. But of course, when things aren't conditioned, aka not warmed up, these bounces will affect you pretty significantly. So in summary, I think that warm up is good in theory, flawed in practice, but not flawed enough to not use it. Okay, so I know that was a mouthful. If you guys want to rewatch that again, then feel free. But more accurately, in theory, warm-up is a great solution and a perfect way of getting your email accounts to good deliverability. But in practice, it's flawed. But it's not really flawed enough to not do it. So that's my personal opinion on the warm-up pool. Now, I also want to talk about the aftermath of the test. Now, after we figured out that warm-up does outperform no warm-up in the long term, we had 500 or so email accounts that were basically useless since they didn't have any good sending reputation. So we thought to ourselves, what would happen if we just quarantined these accounts, turned on the warm-up, and just let them run? So we stopped the sending, started the warm-up, and just to see what would happen. Since we already paid for the infrastructure, we might as well use it for as long as we can, okay? And that's exactly what we did. And the results were shocking. You can see right here, this test started right after the other one ended. And this is an old screenshot. That's why this says 1 week ago, okay? So we started off 0 deliverability. Right, like some of the worst ones that didn't go through warm up. That's what happened, right? Not all of them were about 50. The worst ones were at 0, and we had 0 deliverability. And you can see we turned on warm up and we kept monitoring the score. After 2 days, we went from 0 to 12.5%. After 4 days, we went from 12.5 to 50%. And after just 1 week of sending, we went from 50% to 100% inbox placement, okay? Meaning, even though this account has already technically been burned, just 1 week, not even 2 weeks, just 1 week of quarantine completely restored this account's score. So I think that everything that I've gone over in this video is definitive proof that cold email warming up works. My personal opinion is all of this warm up doesn't work is a manufactured lie to help sell different products. I feel like a lot of the people that are saying that, oh, warm up doesn't work, don't do warm up, coincidentally happen to sell some sort of technology or some sort of software which helps with email account reputation or sending or whatever. I also know that one of the big sources of this no warm up thing is coming from private infrastructure, and their whole idea is, oh, we have better infrastructure, you don't have to do warm up with us, yada, yada, yada. And that's where this kind of came from. But I think that all of that is just all lies in order to help sell you the dream of no warm up, and also, of course, sell you their accounts. So again, I think that this is pretty definitive proof. We're going to keep warm up on across all of our accounts in our agency, and we're not going to be stopping it anytime soon. So that was our general consensus. But before you guys go, I do want to mention one thing. If you do want done for you cold email and you are a B2B service-based business already doing anywhere from 20 to 30K a month, at least in revenue, then consider apply working with us. Now, the process is very simple. We have a 30-minute outbound audit. All we're going to do is check whether we can actually target your ideal client profile live on the call together. We're going to talk about effective scripts and offers that we can pitch to your prospects. And we're going to reference our past work to see if we've ever done anything similar before. So if it makes sense, we'll make you an offer. If it doesn't, then you just get a 30-minute coaching call, which, by the way, other people pay a lot of money for. But either way, you come out on top. So if you're interested, book a free outbound audit below. And with that being said, if you liked and enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It really helps a lot. And with that being said, until next time.